Shalom in Yeshua's name. I'm Dr. Jenkins Sahayam. I welcome you to my Bible teaching series. This topic is entitled The Messiah. Since this topic requires a vast understanding of the scripture to join the various puzzle in the right place, I have split this topic into various parts so as to have a comprehensive understanding of this topic. As my teaching are sequential, if this is the first topic of mine you are listening to, I highly recommend you to listen to my earlier teaching, namely the name of God and the nature of God, before you listen to this teaching. Shalom in Yeshua's name. This is Dr. Jenkins Sahayam. You're now watching part 5 of the Messiah series entitled Israel in the Promised Land. Before getting into this day's topic, let us have a quick recap of what we have covered so far. We saw God created man in his own image. God gave man dominion over all things. Death was never man's destiny as long as he is obedient to God's warning of not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But Satan tricked Adam and Eve to eat out of the forbidden tree. Thus, the dominion of man is forfeited to Satan, who is the king of sin. But God clothed the nakedness of sin in man through garments of skin which indicated blood sacrifice. From then on, we saw God only accepted blood sacrifices. God promised that through the offspring of the woman, which is a human being, the dominion will be restored back to man in the future. The mark of God points to the grace and mercy of God through a sacrifice that is provided to the righteous and wicked alike. God's plan to restore man's dominion by the seed of the woman was tested, however, as a result of mating between angels and human women that resulted in a hybrid race called the Nephilims, who were giants. But God responded by destroying the whole earth through a global flood, but saved Noah and his family, along with the specific pairs of all living creatures, by protecting them in an ark. Though the Nephilim race were destroyed, some of their genetic evil survived. Mankind had only one language prior to their rebellion in the Tower of Babel, where they tried to build a rebellious tower reaching to the skies in order to escape a future flood. This made God to confuse their languages and assign them to other angelic beings and create borders. Yahweh chose a people who are yet to be a nation who would in future understand his divine language and inherit the land he sovereignly chose for himself. Accordingly, Yahweh chose Abraham, a descendant of Noah's son Shem, to make a covenant with him and to carry out his promise of restoring man's dominion through the seed of the woman. Yahweh revealed to Abraham his statutes, judgments, and commandments and law, which is a requirement for successful restoration of man's dominion by being holy, thus sinless, and thereby escape from being held captive to death by Satan as a result of sin, which is transgression of God's law. Yahweh then blessed Abraham and promised him to make him into a great nation through the promised seed, whereby all the nations of the earth would be blessed through that promised seed. Though Abraham had other children, Yahweh, however, established his covenant through his descendants, Isaac, who is the promised son through his legal wife Sarah. After Isaac, the covenant was passed to Isaac's youngest son Jacob, because the eldest son Esau sold his birthright to his brother Jacob, for at one point he thought of what value is the birthright to him when he is indeed going to die out of hunger. But that birthright he sold is the very promise of the promised seed, which would have come through his descendants had he not sold it to Jacob. This is in complete contrast to Abraham, whom Yahweh demanded to offer Isaac as a burnt offering, through whom he had earlier promised to carry out his covenant. But Abraham dared to sacrifice Isaac in faith, for he relied on the power of Yahweh to resurrect Isaac so as to fulfill his promise of bringing out the promised seed through his lineage. Abraham's faith act was rewarded by God with a promised sacrifice that Yahweh himself will provide at the mountain. Yahweh gave Abraham the circumcision as the sign of the covenant. Yahweh appeared to Abraham as a man. Jacob wrestled with the man and recognized him later as God himself. The man blessed Jacob, saying that he will be henceforth called Israel. Yahweh now chose Jacob's descendants as a nation to establish his covenant from which the promised seed is to come. Yahweh gave Israel his law, which they are to follow in order to be a holy and priestly nation for the whole world. Yahweh outlines the requirement needed for him to dwell among his people, which the people were to make, which is the sanctuary. And Aaron was consecrated to be a prototype of Messiah as a priest whose purpose is to mediate between God and man and also bear the sins of the people symbolically. Yahweh fulfills the initial promise to Abraham of giving to his descendants the promised land of Canaan, which he sovereignly chose. Yahweh declares Israel to be his firstborn. Yahweh gave them the command to kill a Passover lamb and apply its blood to the doorposts of their Israelite house, which would serve as a sign to protect the firstborn of the family from the angel of death. Yahweh makes a marriage covenant with Israel. As a nation, Yahweh said he has given blood upon the altar to make atonement for the souls. Yahweh said he is a merciful and gracious God, abounding in goodness and truth, bearing iniquity, transgression, and sin, but by no means clearing the guilty. Yahweh stood in front of a rock and asked Moses to strike the rock, which yielded water. Yahweh asked the people, bitten by the fiery serpents, to look at the brazen serpent upon a stake in faith, which he commanded Moses to make in order to be healed. Yahweh equates his covenant people worshipping other gods to harlotry. Yahweh reveals himself as a jealous God. Yahweh stresses the importance of sacrifice. Yahweh warns his people about the curses upon anyone who does not obey the words of his law. According to Yahweh's law, a wife who is guilty of adultery is to drink from the cup containing the bitter water of curses. A divorced wife after remarriage can never be remarried to her former husband. Seventh year is a time of sovereign rest for the land and freeing of Hebrew slaves without extracting a payment for freedom. The year of Jubilee is the time of restoration of the property which had to be handed over to its original owner. A slave can be redeemed of himself or his property by a kinsman redeemer. Yahweh also warned about false prophets who will be able to do miracles yet lead the people astray by making them to worship other gods and to transgress Yahweh's commandments. Yahweh also warned the people entering into the promised land, as we read in Deuteronomy 5. You shall walk in all the ways which Yahweh your God has commanded you, that you may live and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. In Deuteronomy 7, we read, when Yahweh your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you, and when Yahweh your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of Yahweh will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. But thus you shall deal with them. You shall destroy their altars and break down their sacred pillars and cut down their wooden images and burn their carved images with fire. This was the instruction Yahweh gave the Israelites while they were to enter the promised land of Canaan. If you could recollect, these Canaanites are not normal human beings, but they carry in them the genetic evil of the Nephilims. But the Israelites, upon entering into the promised land, didn't fully keep that word. For this reason, we read in Judges 2 that then the angel of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you from Egypt and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall be thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare to you. So it was, when the angel of Yahweh spoke these words to all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept. Afterward, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yahweh and served the Baals. And they forsook Yahweh, God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them. And they bowed down to them, and they provoked Yahweh to anger. They forsook Yahweh and served Baal and Ashtoreth. And the anger of Yahweh was out against Israel. So he delivered them into the hands of the plunderers, who despoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went out, the hand of Yahweh was against them for calamity, as Yahweh had said, and as Yahweh had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. Nevertheless, Yahweh raised up judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they would not listen to the judges, but they played the harlot with other gods and bowed down to them. They turned quickly from the way in which their fathers walked in obeying the commandments of Yahweh. They did not do so. And when Yahweh raised up judges for them, Yahweh was with the judge and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For Yahweh was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who oppressed them and harassed them. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers by following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. Then the anger of Yahweh was hot against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not heeded my voice, I also will no longer drive out before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, whether they will keep the ways of Yahweh to walk in them as their fathers kept or not. Therefore Yahweh left those nations without driving them out immediately, nor did he deliver them into the hand of Joshua. So this picture shows the map of the promised land of Canaan, and at the right we see the land being divided among the tribes of Israel. And it happened so, in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes, than walking according to the commandment of God. So God warned the people by raising prophet Samuel. But after Samuel grew old, the people demanded a king for them. And Yahweh said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. And he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. And you will cry out in that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves, and Yahweh will not hear you in that day. It is very interesting to note in these verses that Yahweh was grieved when the people demanded a king, because Yahweh revealed that by demanding a human king, people have rejected him as king over them. Later, at the direction of God, Samuel took a flask of oil and poured it on the head of Saul and kissed him and said, is it not because that Yahweh has anointed you commander over his inheritance? Here again we see the concept of being anointed, which is Mashiach or Messiah, with a kingly role. And Samuel introduced Saul to the congregation and said, now therefore, here is the king whom you have chosen and whom you have desired. And take note, Yahweh has set a king over you. If you fear Yahweh and serve him and obey his voice and do not rebel against the commandment of Yahweh, then both you and the king who reigns over you will continue following Yahweh your God. However, if you do not obey the voice of Yahweh but rebel against the commandment of Yahweh, then the hand of Yahweh will be against you as it was against your fathers. But Saul turned out to be anything but a good king. So the prophet Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly, you have not kept the commandment of Yahweh your God, which he commanded you, for now Yahweh would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now your kingdom shall not continue. Yahweh has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and Yahweh has commanded him to be the commander over his people, because you have not kept what Yahweh commanded you." At one point, Samuel rebuked Saul and said, has great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh, he also has rejected you from being king. And Saul's actions grieved the prophet Samuel day by day. Now Yahweh said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king among his sons." Accordingly, Samuel went to Jesse's house and asked for his sons to assemble. But none of his sons found Yahweh's favor. So Samuel asked Jesse if he had any more sons. And Jesse told him that his youngest son, David, is keeping the sheep in the field. So Samuel asked Jesse to bring David to him. So Jesse sent and brought him in. Now David was ruddy, with bright eyes, and good looking. And Yahweh said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah. David then went on to become Yahweh's favorite king, to an extent that Yahweh himself witnessed about him to be a man after his own heart. Hence, Yahweh made an everlasting covenant with David. 2 Samuel chapter 7. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. But my steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. In the meantime, David wanted to build a place of worship for Yahweh, which would house the Ark of the Covenant. But Yahweh refused him to build it, for David has fought many wars and shed many blood in those wars. However, Yahweh permitted that one of David's sons after him could build the temple which David wished for. Accordingly, David invited his elders to his assembly and addressed them as follows. 1 Chronicles chapter 28. After everyone was there, David stood up and said, "Listen to me, my people. I wanted to build a place where the sacred chest would be kept, so we could go there and worship Yahweh our God. I have prepared all the supplies for building a temple. But Yahweh has refused to let me build it, because he said, I have killed too many people in battle. Yahweh God chose Judah to be the leading tribe in Israel. Then from Judah, he chose my father's family, and from that family, he chose me to be the king of Israel. And he promised that my descendants will also rule as kings. Yahweh has blessed me with many sons, but he has chose my son Solomon to be the next king of Israel. Yahweh said to me, your son Solomon will build my temple and it will honor me. Solomon will be like a son to me and I will be like a father to him. If he continues to obey my laws and commands, his kingdom will never end. With these words, and at the end of his life, we read King David's last words in 2 Samuel 23:2. The Spirit of Yahweh spoke by me, and his word was in my tongue. We will read the significance of these words and Yahweh's testimony about David to be a man after his own heart in another episode. So far, we have seen the role of the anointed or Messiah. The priestly role is to mediate between God and man, and the kingly role is to govern the people. Two different families were chosen for this task, and both received an eternal covenant regarding this from Yahweh. Jeremiah 33. For thus says Yahweh, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priests shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to burn grain offerings, and to make sacrifices forever. So, according to the covenant made by Yahweh to David and the promise he gave, Yahweh appeared to Solomon, and we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, Yahweh speaking to Solomon. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom as I covenanted with David your father, saying, you shall not fail to have a man to rule in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments which I have set before you, and go on and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot them from my land which I have given them, and this house which I have sanctified for my name I will cast out of my sight, and will make it a proverb and a byword among all people. And as for this house which is exalted, everyone who passes by it will be astonished and say, why has Yahweh done thus to this land and this house? Then they will answer, because they forsook Yahweh, God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and embraced other gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore, he has brought all this calamity on them. So Solomon built the temple that David wished, and the temple housed the Ark of the Covenant. But Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom Yahweh had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. Therefore Yahweh said to Solomon, because you have done this and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David. I will tear it out from the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away the whole kingdom. I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. This picture shows the map of Israel during the time of King Solomon. But after Solomon, as per the curse of Yahweh, Israel was divided into the northern kingdom and southern kingdom as a result of revolt by the rest of the tribes against Judah due to the racist attitude of Solomon's son Rehoboam, who succeeded him. The northern kingdom retained the name of Israel and chose Jeroboam as their king and declared Samaria as its capital, whereas the southern kingdom was named after the tribe of Judah and retained Jerusalem as its capital and hence the temple as well. But in order to prevent his people from going to Jerusalem in Judah, King Jeroboam of the northern kingdom of Israel established competitive pilgrimage centers in his own land. So the kingdom of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, would go on to exist for around 236 years, with Jeroboam as its first king and King Hoshea as its last king. The common epitaph of the kings of Israel is that he did evil in the sight of Yahweh and walked in the way of Jeroboam and in his sin by which he had made Israel sin. That is, Jeroboam was instrumental in leading the people of Israel into idolatry and thereby transgress the commandments of Yahweh. So, to warn these people, Yahweh sent to them prophets who would warn the people about the consequences of going after other gods, forsaking the covenant of Yahweh, and transgressing his commandments. But these people would not listen to the prophets, and the curse, as per the Torah or the law, which was made known to them by Moses at the direction of Yahweh, took its course. And the northern kingdom of Israel was captured by the kingdom of Assyria, who took the people of Israel and scattered them to places as seen in the map. Not only that, the Assyrians also brought people from the other parts of their empire and settled them in Israel. 2 Kings 17. Then the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Kutha, Ava, Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they took possession of Samaria and dwelt in its cities. And it was so, at the beginning of their dwelling there, they did not fear Yahweh. On the other hand, the southern kingdom of Judah would go on to exist around 395 years, with Rehoboam as their first king and Zedekiah as the last king. Here also, barring a very few kings, the rest of the kings of Judah were as evil inclined as the kings of the northern kingdom. Noteworthy among the kings of Judah is King Hezekiah, about whom it is recorded in 2 Kings chapter 18. And he did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his father David had done. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden images, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the children of Israel burnt incense to it and called it Nehushtan. He trusted in Yahweh, God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor who were before him. For he held fast to Yahweh, he did not depart from following him, but he kept his commandments, which Yahweh had commanded Moses, and Yahweh was with him. He prospered wherever he went. So we read here that King Hezekiah did what was right in the sight of Yahweh. And the important thing to note here is that King Hezekiah broke the very bronze serpent on the pole which was made by Moses in the wilderness at the command of Yahweh, who demanded the faith, the people bitten by those fiery serpents, to look unto the brazen serpent for healing. But when that very thing turned out to become an idol to the people of Israel, as they even burned incense to it, Yahweh stirred King Hezekiah to break the very thing he commanded the Israelites to make. The Hebrew word for the bronze serpent here in this chapter is the word Nachash, which is the same Hebrew word used for the serpent in the Garden of Eden. So the Hebrew words Nachash and Seraph both have the same meaning, whether it is translated as serpent or a shining one. But the rest of the kings after Hezekiah did increasing evil in the sight of Yahweh, although King Josiah was an exception. So Yahweh sent prophets to the people and warned them about the consequences Judah has to face, like that of the northern kingdom of Israel. Jeremiah 25. Therefore, thus says Yahweh of hosts, because you have not heard my words, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, says Yahweh, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, against its inhabitants, and against these nations all around, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, a hissing, and perpetual desolations. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of a mirth, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones, and the light of the lamp, and the whole land shall be in desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And Yahweh again confirmed his judgment against Judah, saying, for thus says Yahweh, after 70 years are completed at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you, and cause you to return to this place. And accordingly, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon laid siege to the city of Jerusalem and invaded the southern kingdom of Judah. However, he established puppet kings to rule Judah in the form of Jehoiakim, Jeconiah, and Zedekiah. But at one point, when Nebuchadnezzar came to know that the king of Judah was planning a revolt against him, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem and, most importantly, the temple that was built by Solomon, which housed the Ark of the Covenant. Nebuchadnezzar carried away all the sacred objects to his own palace in Babylon. However, the Ark of the Covenant whereabout is a mystery until today. Nebuchadnezzar also took some of the people from Judah as captives to Babylon. Among them noteworthy are the prophet Daniel and his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who are known also by their Babylonian names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Another prophet who was also taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar to Babylon is the prophet Ezekiel. So this picture shows the route of the captivity of Judah to Babylon. In general, this map shows how the northern kingdom of Israel was taken captive by the Assyrians, and the southern kingdom of Judah taken captive by the Babylonians, and how the Assyrians settled people from their empire into the promised land. It is in these circumstances, when God's timeline of 70 years of captivity was about to be completed, we see Prophet Daniel praying to God of how this captivity is going to end. At this point, we see Angel Gabriel being sent by God to Prophet Daniel to reveal his plan for the people of Judah. Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, that is Jerusalem, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So, this is very interesting because time and again we see the people were not able to keep their covenant with Yahweh adequately and thus had to face the consequences for violating the terms and conditions of the covenant, which is the Torah or the law. But Yahweh now has a plan and time for the people to finish transgression, put an end to sin, atone for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal the vision and prophecy, and anoint the most holy place. As per this timeline, and according to the prophecy of Prophet Isaiah, who prophesied 150 years earlier about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, and about the Persian king Cyrus, who would be instrumental in rebuilding the temple. We read his prophecy in Isaiah chapter 44 that says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple your foundation shall be laid." Accordingly, in Ezra chapter 1, we read how this prophecy came to pass. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, "Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth Yahweh God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you of all his people? May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of Yahweh God of Israel. He is God, which is in Jerusalem." As per this decree, Nehemiah the governor and Ezra the scribe took the initiative to rebuild the temple and Jerusalem, and finally completed the task of building Jerusalem and the temple. This temple came to be known as the Second Temple. But even after they returned, the succeeding generation of people continued their rebellion, ignoring the voice of the prophets, which made God to finally declare in Amos chapter 8, verse 11, "Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh God, that I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh." True to these words, we find there was no recognized prophets or prophecies concerning Israel or the plan of God for the next 400 years after the last recognized prophet, Malachi. These years would see the Greek invasion of the Holy Land. Later on, the Greek Empire would fall and would be divided into 4 different kingdoms, by which time Greek would become the lingua franca of the Holy Land, and later the land would see the invasion by the Romans. In this period, the Romans would install, by this time, the Romans installed Jewish proselytes as king of Judah province in violation of the law which demanded the qualification of Davidic ancestry in order to be made king. Also, they installed corrupt people who have no provable Aaronic lineage to be the high priest of the temple. King Herod went on to expand the temple into a massive structure so as to stamp his authority in religious issues as well as to win the approval of the people of Judah. Now, let us see some of the warnings by the prophets regarding the people of Judah and Israel. Psalm 78, we read, "Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of the old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, telling to the generation to come the praises of Yahweh, and his strength and his wonderful works that he has done. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, the children who would be born, that they may arise and declare them to their children, that they may set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments." So God declared to the people that he would speak only in parables, which could be understood only based on one's knowledge of his law or Torah. Accordingly, we find in Isaiah chapter 5 Yahweh's grievance about his people. "What more could have been done to my vineyard, that I have not done in it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now, please, let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its walls, and it shall be trampled down. I will lay it waste, it shall not be pruned or dug, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of Yahweh of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looked for justice, but behold, oppression, for righteousness, but behold, a cry for help." So, this parable is akin to the law of sowing and reaping, the knowledge of which is required to interpret its deeper meaning. In Isaiah chapter 50, we read, "Thus says Yahweh, where is the certificate of your mother's divorce, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? For your iniquities you have sold yourselves, and for your transgression your mother has been put away. Why, when I came, was there no man? Why, when I called, was there none to answer? Is my hand shortened at all that it cannot redeem, or have I no power to deliver?" So, this parable again can be interpreted only through the knowledge of the law of divorce. Again, in Jeremiah chapter 3, we read, "They say, if a man divorces his wife, and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, may he return to her again? Would not that land be greatly polluted? But you have played the harlot with many lovers, yet return to me, says Yahweh." And he goes on to say, "Then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but went and played the harlot also. So it came to pass through her casual harlotry that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and trees. Applying the law, we can understand the imagery of harlotry to be that of worshipping other gods by his covenant people. And by issuing a certificate of divorce to Israel, and after that she gets defiled by others, which is worshipping other gods, Yahweh cannot legally remarry Israel back as per his law. But we mysteriously find here that after issuing the certificate of divorce, Yahweh asking Israel to return back to him. This mystery will be addressed in a different topic in this series. Again, we read this in Hosea 1. Then God said to him, "Call her name Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. For I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and will save them by Yahweh their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword or battle, by horses or horsemen." This is interesting because the one who is speaking in this verse is Yahweh, who says that he would save the house of Judah by Yahweh their God. So one Yahweh speaking about another Yahweh. Then God said, "Call his name Lo-Ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, You are not my people, that it shall be said to them, You are the sons of the living God." Here again, we find Yahweh declaring on the one hand that Israel is no longer his people and he will not be their God. On the other hand, he says that Israel would be blessed with uncountable measure of people and would be called the sons of the living God. Again, in Hosea chapter 2, we read, "Bring charges against your mother, bring charges, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight, lest I strip her naked and expose her, as in the day she was born, and make her like a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst." But in verse 18 we read, "And it shall be in that day, says Yahweh, that you will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master." Yahweh also warned Israel through prophet Ezekiel, as we read in chapter 16. "And I will judge you as women who committed adultery and shed blood are judged, and bring upon you the blood of wrath and jealousy, and I will give you into their hands, and they shall throw down your vaulted chamber and break down your lofty places. They shall strip you of your clothes and take your beautiful jewels and leave you naked and bare. They shall bring up a crowd against you, and they shall stone you and cut you to pieces with their swords." This again need to be interpreted through the law. Here in this case, the law of jealousy, and the nakedness here by stripping of clothes refers to the removal of the sacrificial covering for sin that exposes sin. Again, we read this in Ezekiel chapter 23. "They shall also strip you of your clothes and take away your beautiful jewels. Thus I will put an end to your lewdness and your whoring begun in the land of Egypt, so that you shall not lift up your eyes to them or remember Egypt any more. For thus says Yahweh God, Behold, I will deliver you into the hands of those whom you hate, into the hands of those from whom you turn in disgust. And they shall deal with you in hatred, and take away all the fruit of your labor, and leave you naked and bare. And the nakedness of your whoring shall be uncovered. Your lewdness and your whoring have brought this upon you, because you played the whore with the nations, and defiled yourself with their idols. You have gone the way of your sister, therefore I give her cup into your hand. Thus says Yahweh God. You shall drink your sister's cup, that is deep and large. You shall be laughed at and held in derision, for it contains much. So the same fate Israel experienced was also pronounced on Judah. This was expected in the line of prophecy that Yahweh declared to Moses. Deuteronomy 31. And Yahweh said to Moses, Behold, you are about to lie down with your fathers. Then this people will rise and war after the foreign gods among them in the land that they are entering, and they will forsake me and break my covenant that I have made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be devoured, and many evils and troubles will come upon them, so that they will say in that day, Have not these evils come upon us? Because our God is not among us, and I will surely hide my face in that day because of all the evils that they have done, because they have turned to other gods. Accordingly, the curses that was pronounced upon Israel for its harlotry is that they will be laughed at. Israel would drink bitter waters, and God would forsake them and hide his face from them. Israel would be stripped naked by removing the sin covering, which in part is the temple where the sacrifices are to be offered at its altar. And the people would suffer the blood of wrath. The people will be taken based on casting lots. The people will be led to slaughter like a sheep. The people will thirst, which would be devoid of hearing the word of God, and finally will be flogged on account of their rebellion. But in spite of this, we also read in Hosea chapter 2, Yahweh speaking, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, in loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know Yahweh. It shall come to pass in that day that I will answer, says Yahweh. I will answer the heavens, and they shall answer the earth. The earth shall answer with grain, with new wine, and with oil. They shall answer Jezreel. Then I will sow her for myself in the earth, and I will have mercy on her who had not obtained mercy. Then I will say to those who are not my people, You are my people, and they shall say, You are my God. Yahweh also showed to Ezekiel the prophet a vision that offered a clue as to how he will fulfill his promise. In this vision, Ezekiel the prophet was shown a valley filled with dried bones, which Yahweh says that of representing Israel with unfulfilled promises. However, Yahweh would command the dry bones to come back to life by his word and the Spirit in order to fulfill his promise of restoring them back to the land. Also, we read in Ezekiel chapter 37 about Yahweh's sign given to prophet Ezekiel. Again, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, As for you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it, for Judah and for the children of Israel and his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel and his companions. Then join them one to another for yourself into one stick, and they will become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, Will you not show us what you mean by this? Say to them, Thus says Yahweh God. Surely I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I will join them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they will be one in my hand, and the sticks on which you write will be in your hand before their eyes. Also he say to them, Thus says Yahweh God, Surely I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their land. And I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be king over them all. They shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again. They shall not defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their God. David my servant shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments, and observe my statutes, and do them. Then they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, where your fathers dwelled. And they shall dwell there, they, their children, and their children's children forever, and my servant David shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. The nations also will know that I, Yahweh, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forevermore. Also, through Jeremiah the prophet, Yahweh declares the following: Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in that day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says Yahweh. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No more shall every man teach his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for they all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says Yahweh. For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more. Thus says Yahweh, who gives the sun for the light by day, the ordinance of the moon and the stars for a light by night, who disturbs the sea and its waves roar. Yahweh of hosts is his name. If these ordinances depart from before me, says Yahweh, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus says Yahweh, if heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, says Yahweh. In spite of these promises, Yahweh also told the prophet Isaiah that the people will not understand his plans. Isaiah chapter 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, Yahweh of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, your iniquity is taken away, and your sin purged. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here am I, send me. And he said, Go and tell this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return and be healed. Then I said, Lord, how long? And he answered, Until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitant, the houses are without a man, the land is utterly desolate. Yahweh has removed men far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land, but yet a tenth will be in it, and will return and be for consuming, as a terebinth tree or as an oak whose stump remains when it is cut down, so the holy seed shall be its stump. So this concludes part 5 of the Messiah series. In the next part, we will find the clue regarding the identity of this holy seed. Shalom.